So how do we access the content provider? Content provider actually are accessed by the content resolver. So out of 4 components, 3 components, activity, broadcast receiver and services, these are started by intent, whereas the content provider, they are accessed by the content resolver. So if Android wants to provide such kind of options where the other should be able to access it, so for that we need to define this content provider in XML file. So in XML file there are 2 things. One is the Android column authority. So this is the symbolic name through which this this content provider will be known within this Android application system. So, an Android column name, and this is the class name that implements the content provider. This is the class name that implements the content provider. So we need to define our content provider in the Android manifest. In Android manifest, the tag is provider, and then within that provider tag, there are 2 subtags: Android column authorities and Android column name. Android column authorities, this is the symbolic name that identifies the entire the provider within the system. That identifies the provider within the system actually. And Android column name is the name of the class. I think for activity, services, broadcast receiver, also we have been giving Android column name. Okay. And how do we create the content provider? So to create the content provider, we define a class that extends the class Android column content dot content provider, and that class must implement 6 methods: query, insert, update, delete, get type, and on create. These are the 6 methods that content provider must implement. So once we get the hold of the content provider, we can call on create, on query, insert, delete, update, and get type. So these are the methods which a third-party applications can call it. But how do we get the reference to this content provider having defined it? So content resolver is the method. Content resolver is the tool to access content provider. Content resolver is the tool. So content resolver, what they do, we as a application user, we know which authority we want to access. So we provide the name of the authority, and then it will identify, okay, it will map to which class it will map to. Okay. So content resolver will help us in mapping the reaching to the class, because class and authorities will be different, maybe different actually. So if authority is given, then content resolver will help us in reaching to that class. And then content resolver has again the CRUD method, and these CRUD methods will internally call the methods of the content provider, like insert, query, update, delete. Content resolver includes the CRUD methods, and that internally calls the method that we have implemented in the content provider. So you can see actually Android also provides a lot of applications where there are all their data in the form of content providers. So most of the time actually we use the content provider and content resolver just for sake of accessing the Android data. Just for sake of accessing the Android data. That's a very rare scenario that we may be required to write the content provider. So in example, I will say that in example ahead, I'll show you how we are accessing the some data from the Android content provider. So for accessing the content provider, what we are going to do, we are going to get the reference to the content resolver. We are going to get the reference to the content resolver. So here you can see this example. We are getting the reference to the content resolver. Okay. And from the content resolver, then we are saying what is the URI of the content resolver, and then we are getting the which columns we want to access, and then we are calling the content resolver dot query content log URI columns of the interest, and then these are the various where clause, where arguments, and then order by. And having it will, this query is going to return us a cursor. Having returned the cursor, then we will be doing the simple cursor movement. So what we do, we check whether any data is there in this cursor, whether we do have any data in this cursor. So we say that cursor will move to first record. If anything is there, then this statement will evaluate to the true. Having evaluate to true, then we will be fetching the data from that cursor. And after fetching the cursor, we move to the next record. We move to the next record. Okay? And that way we get the data. So you can try this. So let's talk about multi-threading. What is multi-threading? Sanjeev? Thread is a kind of a concurrent unit of execution, and thread also has its own call stack for methods and the arguments, local variables, and all these reside within the same process. Actually, all these reside within the same process. So within the same process, they make it the application more parallel. It may not be more parallel, then also it will be concurrent. So the CPU utilization will be higher in the single CPU scenario. So how do we create thread in Java? So in Java, there are two ways of creating the thread. There is a class called thread class, and there is a interface called runnable. So the first is that by extending the thread class. So that class must implement the run method, and whenever we say that call thread.start, then it will run the start running the run method, and it will end when this run method finishes. And this run method finishes. And second is by having the runnable interface. In runnable interface also there is a method run that needs to be implemented. Okay, and then whenever we want to initiate that thread, we will create a object of that class, and we will pass that class as a argument to the thread class, and then whatever the thread is classes gets created, we just start it. When we start it, then it will call the method that has implemented it will call the class that has implemented the runnable interface, and within that class the run method will start executing. The run method will start executing. Okay, and whenever the run method ends, that method, that thread ends. That thread ends. So these are the two ways of creating the thread actually. And in Android, whenever we create we run our program, the first program that runs the main thread, UI thread, that is the main thread actually. And anything if you want to do which takes more than 5 milliseconds on the main thread, it will get you will get a message, application not responding, ANR. You will get a message, application not responding. So anything which you want to do and which is going to take some time, that should be called on the background thread. That should be called on the background thread, either the background thread or the in the background processes. Okay, so background processes are also actually done using services. eh? We also can create the background processing using the services, or we can do using the threads, background threads. So here we are talking about the background. What are the various time consuming or blocking operations? We have various time consuming operations are file operations, network operations, database transactions, complex calculations. So all this needs to be done in the background. And it says that if you will get the message application not responding, an activity will give the message ANR, that is within the 5 seconds, whereas the broadcast receiver will give this message in 10 seconds. Okay. All these concepts were specific to Java only and similar to Java only. Now we are moving to the Android specific inter-thread communication. How the inter-thread communication occurs in the Java. We are not going to discuss that over here actually. We are just going to discuss how the inter-thread communication occurs in the Android. So whenever any application starts, and then if that thread needs to interact with another thread, then the main thread that is going to receive the message must run the a message queue function. And message queue function is the nothing but the looper class. Message queue function is nothing but the looper class. And also we have another class that's called handler. Handler are also the process that handles the message within the message queue. So looper is the class which creates the message queue and waits the messages, whereas the handler is the method, is the class that will assist in handling the message, and that will assist in submitting the message to the message queue. So from the perspective of the class that is going to process the messages, or that has run the looper class, the same class will have to implement the handler class as well, so that it can handle those methods. So handler class has the methods that are obtain message, send message, handle message. Obtain message and send messages are required for the other threads who want to get the okay, at what slot I'm going to put, where I'm going to put the message actually. So through the obtain message you get the slot, and through the send message you put the message into the message queue. Okay. So these are the things that you will see actually, that main thread in Android applications, whenever this runs, it automatically sets the looper class. It automatically sets the looper thread actually. And looper, when it is starting the looper, then the message queue will get established. Message queue will get established. Okay. And once message queue is established, so and within the two running threads, then some of the things that we have to do, we have to establish the message queue. For that we use the looper class. Then we have to submit the queue. For that we use the handler class. We use the open message and send message. And then we will have to process the message. That is done using the handle message. And this handle message is run in the UI component, and then we are able to run the UI. So quite a few classes are there that needs to be worked on for doing a simple inter-thread communication. To handle this, Android has come up with another class, supporting class, that's called async task. Async task, it encapsulates the creation of loopers, threads, and handlers. So it also creates the message queue, it creates the thread, and it creates also the handlers. So async task, for creating any task which is of async task, we will have to subclass from the async task. An async task uses generics and var args, and it has three parameters usually. When we pass it, then it has a type of arguments, the parameters that we are going to pass, what are the progress values that we are expecting from the async task, and what is the result value, what is the final value that we are expecting. And this async task has four methods that needs to be implemented. Those four methods are on pre-execute. So it means that whatever you write, that will run before the running of the execute, before running of the async task. Doing background, whatever we are writing actually over here, that will be created in the separate thread, and that will be run separately. Okay. So doing background, this is invoked in the background thread, and this is the place where we write our any heavy operations or the blocking operations. Whether it required access to the any database, we are calling some web services to fetch the data from the web services. We are calling any website and reading the data. We are downloading the file from some place. So all those things are done into the doing background. While doing background, we can keep calling. We can call a method publish progress. So at the whenever we call publish progress from the doing background, that method calls the another method on progress update. So and this on progress update, it runs on the UI thread, and whatever data that we have got it, we can use that to update our UI. Okay. And another method we have do post execute. So this is the final method that when your doing background is completed, and then everything is done, then this method gets executed. So on the completion of the your background thread, this method gets executed. So whatever we want to do, we should do in the post execute. And for starting the async task, we create an object of the async task and we call the execute method of on that. When we call the execute method on that object along with the parameters that we have defined here. And what is the type of parameters that we are going to pass. So along with that, we execute the async task. It will call the pre-execute, then it will call the doing background. In the doing background, whenever we call a method publish progress, then the on progress update will get called. And once the doing background ends, then the on post execute gets called. Okay. So here you see actually there is a very slow task. This is extends the async task string long void. It means that the parameters that we are going to send, those are the string parameters, and these string parameters directly get supplied into the doing background task. Directly get supplied in doing background task. And long, these are the values that will get published. So these are the long values. These values they get, and whenever the this publish progress is called, it will automatically call the on progress update. And this void is the value that will be returned by doing background. That will be returned by doing background. So at the end, and this value will get passed to the on post execute. Will pass to the on post execute. So you see here we are getting the on progress update long value, and whatever the post execute, whatever the data that the doing background returns, that gets passed to the on post execute. And then out of these four methods, three methods runs in the on the UI thread, where only one method runs on the background thread. So on doing background method is used to create another thread and run in the another separate thread. Okay. Whenever we want to open any web page on our applications, we use the implicit intent action underscore view. Using that intent, the way we do it, intent is equal to new intent action underscore view, and then we pass the URI. URI is a universal resource identifier, and whatever URI we are passing, that needs to be validated. So that needs to be validated by URI.parse. URI.parse, and then in double quotes we give the website address. And then we will be doing the start activity. Okay.